So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jeanette, and welcome Jeanette Sheliga.
Thank you. As she said, my name is Jeanette Sheliga. If you have any questions during the presentation, please don't hesitate to raise your hand and ask. I have given this beginning genealogy speech a couple times for our group here, and so I wanted to change it up a little bit this time in case you've heard me before. Unfortunately with that, some things had to go to put in space for new items to talk about. I felt guilty about not mentioning newspapers today. However, we have, if you don't notice that Dawn's back there videotaping me right now, a YouTube channel for the Niagara County Genealogical Society, and many of our presenters in the past have agreed to allow themselves to be taped. And you can watch a previous beginning session that I've taught up there, and you can learn all about the newspapers and things like that that I won't talk about today. But then also all the other presenters that we've had, I love having these videos available because I've gone back to them many times and like, oh, what did Jim say about those land records? And I will rewatch it, and it helps it sink it in, or if you need to hear something again, you can go back and rewind it a little bit. So I just wanted to let you know that that resource was available. And even today's program will be uploaded to there shortly. So check out our YouTube channel. You can subscribe, and then you'll know when new things are added on. So we're getting started with our genealogy. How many people are just, this is my very first attempt at it? Oh, there's a couple hands. Okay, so hopefully then what I'm going to do today is introduce you to records that you can use to help you trace your family tree. But there's many more out there, so we encourage you to keep coming back to programs like this so that you can learn what's there. One of the things that I always suggest to do first is check to see what you have. A lot of times you might have an obituary kind of tucked into maybe a family Bible or things like that. Lots of things could turn out to be clues. Maybe on the back of a wedding picture is the date of the wedding, things like that. So start being a little investigator about what you have around your house. Another good tip is to let your family know that you're starting this, because when they come across things, they'll share them with you, or they might put you in contact with someone that's already done some of the research. Oh, didn't you know that cousin Sue also worked on this? Things like that. So let it be known to others that you're working on this. So other things around your house that might have clues that you might not think, is maybe jewelry. Sometimes we'll have a date engraved, if it, was a wedding band, welcome. Certificates, newspaper articles, even family films, and pictures, things like that. So really just start to think about what heirlooms you might have and what meaning that they might have to you and to your family. Why did they keep this? And maybe, you can figure out who this person is in the article, that somebody took the time to clip out of the newspaper and save and add it into your tree. Another good tip when you're starting is to interview your family members. Don't wait. So many times, I know I have the same regret. Why didn't I ask some of these questions when I had the opportunity to? And if you're a little nervous about what to ask, or if it seems overwhelming, you can purchase books that will help you guide family members through questions, or even just on Pinterest. You can find questions that are available, sample questions for you to do. A technique that I like to do is not record a person, like, okay, I'm going to interview you now, and all of a sudden they clam up. Is I will turn on the audio record on my phone and just set it aside, and then I will have a family member look through photo albums. And that'll get them talking. When they start talking about the people and the pictures and things like that, stories will start to naturally flow. So that's just one easy way to go about it. And then you can always go back and re-listen, and that'll help you tag. Because if the person's talking, you're desperately trying to write down all the names and stories, you're probably going to miss a couple of details. So recording it, even if it's just the audio, is always helpful. So a little bit of the types of trees that you might be working on. If you're working up your family tree, yes.
Can I just share something about the
Yes.
other one you just said? I heard on a podcast the other day that there's something called Storyworth. I don't know if you heard of it.
I haven't.
But they said that you can actually buy you don't buy the program. They send you a list of a question every month, and you write the answer, and then you could call it in, and they put it in the book for you, and in the end of the year,
Wow.
they send you the book. It's called Storyworth.
Wow, so they transcribe your
They,
vocal. Yeah.
yeah, and I don't know whether they send you the disc with the vocal, but you could give it for Christmas gifts or
Yeah, so
whatever.
somebody that can talk fast but can't type,
Right.
that would be the person that you would want to, that's interesting. I'll have to check that out. Thank you.
Storyworth, it said.
Okay. So the two type of trees that you kind of be dealing with, the one is your ancestral tree, and that's where you're climbing up, where one person has two parents and they have two parents and then they have two parents. And this is so your tree will go evenly. Where your tree starts to get a little lopsided is when you're starting from a couple and working down, because if one set of parents have 3 children and the oldest has 6 children, but the middle child only has 1. The tree can get lopsided quite quickly. And this is interesting to research down, even though you're trying to research up, because if it's kind of like on the Price is Right with Plinko, you never know where the family album kind of went, or who inherited that, type of thing. And so if you're working with your cousins, then they might be able to help you out with things that they've inherited or pieces of knowledge that they know that you don't know. And so those are the two type of trees. Speaking of cousins, sometimes it can be confusing as to who's a second cousin and who's a cousin once removed and all that stuff like that. So I'll give you an example here. So up at the top, Inez had 2 daughters. So Carol and Nina were sisters. They both got married and had children. So Linda and Dave were first cousins. Linda and Dave got married and had children. Mike and Scott are second cousins. Okay, so each generation down that's evenly layered, it just keeps adding numbers, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, okay? When you're starting to talk about where you're referring to a generation that's off, that's where the once removed comes. So Linda and Dave are first cousins. Her son Mike is a first cousin once removed, 1 generation removed from Dave. And then Mike's son Adam is still a first cousin, but he's twice removed. And you can look these up online. There's lots of different cousin generation charts that can help you. Just Google it if that's something that you're interested in, trying to figure out the relationship between someone. All right, so the first handout that's in your packet is on pedigree charts. Much of what I'm going to say is right on your packet, so you don't have to worry about furiously writing it down. I put it down for you. So I wanted to give you some good tips to start with when you're starting your genealogy research. The first is that we always capitalize surnames. So a person's last name is usually in all caps. The reason why is because there's some people that have a last name that's similar to someone else's first name. And sometimes it's last name, comma, first name, or it's first name, last name. What if that comma kind of gets erased after 150 years on the document and we're confused as to who we're talking about? So we will always put the last name in capitals to just make sure that we're clarifying that that's the person's last name. So that's your first good tip when you are putting together your tree. The second one is that you always want to use a woman's maiden name, the name she was born with. You don't have to worry about putting her married name, because when you're filling out the chart that's on the back of the first page that I gave you, the marriage is indicated on the chart, spouse of this person. Okay, so if you were trying to find her birth records, you're not going to search for her by her married name. You're going to search by the name that she was when she was born. So that's the name that we always try to put on our trees. The other thing is that people go by nicknames. My Grandpa Jack was Grandpa Jack my whole life, but he was actually born John. And so if I was trying to find his birth record and I'm doing searches for Jack, I'm not going to find it. But I might find newspaper articles with his name Jack and not John. You know, so sometimes you have to then get creative and start searching for both names. In order for you to remember who it is that you're talking about, or when you're trying to share your tree with others, it's a good practice to put both their names. You want to put the name that they were born with, but then you want to put the alias name in parentheses so that you also remember to try searching for both of those names, or to just help you remember who it is you're talking about. Particularly if it's a, somebody whose the son is the second and then the grandson is the third, and things like that. If they went by different names to help distinguish them between their dad and their grandfather, that would be a good way to help you keep that straight on your family tree. The last tip that we suggest doing, that's a good common practice for genealogists, is how we put dates. Now, it's very common for us to put, this, month, day, year. And if we were looking at that, our brains would probably automatically go with, well, yeah, that's June 8th, 1953. But the problem is when you start doing your tree, you're going to get into the 1800s and the 1700s. And if you put just 53, you're not going to know which century you're referring to. Also, other countries don't go month, day, year. They go day, month, year. And so if you're starting to do research in other countries, it's going to get confusing as to which calendar type you're doing. So what we always do, and it looks like, I left it off my slide. So it's a good thing you guys have handouts. Generally, I have the answer right here, which I have negated for some reason. So the right way for you to put 6/8/53 would be to put 8 and then June, or the abbreviation of June, J-U-N, and then 1953. You want to put all 4. And that's out in your handout, and I apologize it wasn't on my screen. So you want to put the date, spell out the month, and then the 4-digit year. And I'll fix that for next time. Okay, so that's kind of our good practices. Yes?
I have a question that I just ran across this week. Multiple men in the family all named Robert. I saw it with Roman numerals, I saw it with third, RD, and then I saw it with Robert son of. Which is the most effective, or is there a correct way of delineating?
I would say what's on their birth certificate, because it could be that, one was born junior, but then later on in life, he had a son and named him the third. So it could be a mix of different ones. So try to find the records, that say how they decided to do it, and then you kind of come up with the way I'm going to do it and stick with it so that you don't confuse your own records, with the different names. So, because I have the same problem. I have 3 Johns in a row, and I'm trying to share a story about that family, and I always have to go John's father, John, because I'm trying to speak to people that might not necessarily be genealogists that are, trying to read it. And I'm like, I've got to find a better way. So it's a struggle, definitely. So whatever you find, just try to be consistent with how you're gonna do it. Yeah?
I have a question. My grandparents had 3 different sons with the same name because the first one died when he was 2, and then the next one died when he was 8, and then the last born was his name. Would it just be the date that would differentiate them?
I would, yeah, that's how I would do it. I would differentiate them with the date that they were born. Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky. So the next record, or the first record type I'm going to introduce you to are census records. Okay, and there is a handout for this as well that shows you what census records were done with the federal government, with New York State, a couple places where to find them. The first federal population census was taken in 1790. The way I understand it, it was shortly after the Revolutionary War, and the government wanted to know how many men they had available should they need to fight a war again. And so they made it a law that said every 10 years we're going to take a count of people around the country, and you are required to answer the census takers' questions when they come to your door. We will fine you $25. And so they would come to your door and you would answer the questions. It was done every 10 years up to present, but unfortunately the 1890 census was lost in a fire in the 1920s. And I guess it wasn't even necessarily the fire that took it out, but the water. And so the 1890 census is no longer there. However, if you're researching ancestors that lived in New York State happened to do a census right near it in 1892. So there is one that's a little close. The 1940 census was the last one that was publicly released. Due to privacy laws, there's a 72-year wait before they release the next census. So the 1950 census will come out in 2022. So hold your breath. And as they started it, like I said, when they started, they just wanted to know how many men there were. As times changed, the questions that they asked were changed, and what information they were interested in. So here's an image of the 1790 census. And so if you're looking for your ancestors, you know that we lived in Niagara County, for hundreds of years. Well, Niagara County didn't exist in 1790. I mean, this was before the Erie Canal even came through here. This was not Niagara County was 1808 when it was formed. So you have to always think about where, geography, how it affects your genealogy, and kind of research the place that you're searching in addition to, the people that you're trying to search. So there was only, I think, 11 states at the time that they censused, and the counties in New York were here. There was 15 of them. And the questions that they asked were names of heads of families, and then the next column, so only the men, the heads of the family, were listed here. The next question, they said, free white males of 16 years old and upwards, and then they would put a number of how many people that they had that lived in the household at that time. Then the next column was free white males under 16 years. The next column was free white females. The next column was all other free persons. And then the last column was slaves. So those were the questions that were asked in the 1790 census. So each 10 years they started adding more questions. It wasn't until 1850 that they started putting names of everyone that was in the household. Okay, so the women and children, everyone was included. And so you can even see that there's more questions asked. How old are you? What sex are you? Color? What is your profession? Where were you born? And married within the year, and if you attended school within the year. So they're starting to ask a little bit more questions. And the occupation is nice to know for those of you that do have some people that have the same name, which one worked on the railroad versus which one worked at the retail, the grocery market, will help you determine, which person, if you have ones in the same name. The 1900 federal census added lots of more questions. And each year they do more and more. Now they have street addresses, house numbers, the name of the family, their relationship to the head of household, whether it was the child, the spouse, the mother-in-law, okay, who is living there, your color, so sorry, it's little color, race, sex, date of birth, month, year, age at last birthday, whether single, married, widowed, or divorced, number of years married, and if you're a mother, of how many children, and how many of those children are still living. Those questions for the mother were only asked in the 1900 and 1910 census, and one person in my family, she had 16 kids, but only 7 were living. And it made me go, oh my gosh, and start to think about her in a different way. When you start to read that she lost so many children. And then it asks you, where were you born? And then where was your dad born? Where was your mom born? So it's starting to help you figure that out. If you're an alien to this country, what year did you immigrate? How long have you lived in the United States? Have you become a citizen? Have you naturalized? Then they also asked, what is your profession? Can you read, write, speak English? And then do you own your home or rent your home? And what type of home is it? Is it a farm? They're starting to get more and more information. On the back of the census paper I gave you is a sample blank of the 1920 census. So you can kind of see the questions that they asked there. And then the next one I had to print out for you because there were so many questions It takes 2 pages. The 1940 census, the last one that was released to the public. So it's a front and back, and you can kind of see that it bleeds over. The column on the right-hand side of the first page starts on the next page. What's interesting about the 1940 census is they mark who the census person talked to. So say there's a family, a father, mother, and some children. Did the father answer the door and was asking the questions? Did the mother? Okay, that person's indicated by an X with a circle around it by their name. Because just because it's written down doesn't mean that the people didn't make a mistake or lie about how old they were. Or maybe the census taker couldn't quite understand them and wrote down, and they misspelled the name. You know, it's not a perfect system, but it's a good snapshot. It's a good idea. It's a good clue to go off of. One of the questions that they asked is, does your family own a radio? You know, so lots of different questions that they're trying to get. And then if you're lucky, there's certain lines where it says supplemental questions. If your ancestor happened to fall on that line on the page, they ask them additional questions at the bottom. So make sure you check over on the left where it says supplemental question. If your family happened to hit where it hit, then scroll down and then make sure you check the bottom of the page to see the answers for those questions. Any questions about census records? Okay, moving on. So, birth, marriage, and death. Lots of genealogy information that we can get from there. There's not a corresponding handout for this, but I will show you where you can find some of these records, and we'll talk about it. So, vital records are considered to be a primary source when you're doing your genealogy, meaning that someone of authority witnessed the event and took record of it. So the doctor that helped you, give birth, that doctor signed the birth certificate, they witnessed the event, whatever. If the birth was announced in the newspaper a couple days later, that's a secondary source because the people in the newspaper didn't witness the birth. They just are taking it from you, and they could make a mistake. Not to say that there weren't mistakes made on birth records and things like that. Vital records are great because it helps us get up that next generation because often on birth, marriage, and death, the question is asked, who are the parents? And so that helps us get up a generation. It's not always clear as to when records were started to be kept. New York State started saying in 1880, we want you to start writing all this stuff down. That doesn't mean that, they were still having people get up to compliance until 1912. That doesn't mean that certain spots didn't start earlier on it just on their own. So you kind of have to, where you think your ancestors lived or where you know they live, start asking some questions. Go to the county clerk website, go to the city clerk website, start to say, or start to research, when did you start recording these vital records? And then oftentimes they'll tell you even how to order them. There is a law, welcome. There are privacy laws concerning these right now. New York State has its own laws, which are different than other states. They can kind of decide when they want to start releasing those records to the public. For New York State, birth certificates have to be on file for at least 75 years. And you have to show that the person's deceased. Death certificates have to be on file for at least 50 years. And marriage certificates on file for at least 50 years. And both spouses are known to be deceased. So a lot of times when you're asking for these records, you'll get a certificate, but it's not the type with the raised seal, and it'll come with a big stamp on it. They'll say, for genealogical purposes only, so that you can't try to take someone else's birth certificate and make it your own. You might get some, just be aware of the rules before you go in there and get your heart broken and you can't order a record that's not available. certificates, birth records. It's amazing to me. I'm going to show you a couple examples, all from Buffalo, and they're from different times, but how different the records look from year to year to year, and what questions they ask. This was my grandmother's. She was born in 1928. There's hardly any information. It's her name, the date, her parents. That was it. Thanks. Okay, I mean, great if I didn't have it anywhere else, but you know, I want more, of course. You know, then there's also ones. This was my great aunt Ida, well, my grand aunt Ida, and she was difficult to find because when they filed her birth certificate, they hadn't named her yet, so it was listed under baby. And so it took me a bit to find baby. But this offers a little bit more information. You know, the date of birth, the place of birth, the father's name, where he lived, the father's birthplace. How old was the father when she was born? What was his occupation? The mother's maiden name, where she lives, where was she born, her age, how many children she's already had, and how many are now living. So more information. Now, this one was from 1903, I think, whereas the one from 1920, you would think that as we would get more to recent time, that more questions would be asked, but it seemed like the opposite in Buffalo. This was my grandfather's one. Same thing, so this is 1922. Same questions, just different format. But again, it really helps when you've got, you know, the birthplace of the parents, the mother's maiden name, you know, what industry, what occupation were they doing, you know, to help you find them through their occupation. So there's lots of good things. Now here's one thing. So this is my grandpa's. The person that filled this out, that filed it, misspelled his name. His name is actually S-Z-E-L-I-G-A. His parents never fixed it. So his parents and his siblings were all Sheliga, S-Z-E-L-I-G-A. I'm the, like, our S-H-E-L-I-G-A is the only Sheligas around. So, because it was misspelled. In fact, here's his baptism that has the S-Z-E-L-I-G-A, which, again, these are great for help, but it's, so that they got the name right, but the date is wrong. They missed his month they missed his birthday by like a month. So you have to, when you're searching for records, kind of, you know, collect everything you can, and then hopefully, you know, they all match, but if they don't, start to, you know, like try your best to find out which ones are correct. You know, if 3 say this date and 1 only says that one, maybe you feel a little bit safer to take the one that has the common date. So church records are considered to be a secondary source because it happened after the fact and by a person that didn't witness the event. Speaking of church records, many of their old books that they used to keep happened prior to when that 1880, when New York State started saying, we want you to start keeping records of this. This is my, I don't know, 3rd or 4th time great-grandmother. That's her baptism from 1866. I found it on microfilm in the Grosvenor room at the Buffalo Public Library. They had various church records on microfilm. And so I was able to find out who her godparents were, to confirm, you know, her birth and everything like that. It was really neat. In those same books, I found her son, and so this was the birth record, but the priest was kind enough to add a little note when he got married later on to who and where. So you're not sure, you'll never, you know until you look what other information might be included on some of the church records that you come across. If you're looking for church records too, and the library might not have a copy, check with genealogical societies such as ours. Check with historian offices, you know, they might be around, you know, and you might get lucky. Another type of birth record that I've come across a couple times in my family was a delayed birth certificate. I'm not sure why. She was born in 1897 in Elmira, so it wasn't like on a farm in, you know, a quite rural area. Why she didn't have a birth record? Did they miss it? Did they lose it? I don't think it burned down, but maybe it did. But later in her life, and I don't know why in 1959 she wanted one. Maybe she wanted a passport to go on vacation. I don't know what was required at the time. but she filed for a delayed birth certificate, and she lists, she had to have an affidavit from someone, so her mother signed that, yes, I was witness to this. Then she had to prove her age by using the New York State Census in 1915, a lodge record from 1918, her marriage record, and a child's birth record, which maybe that's a church record or something like that. So she had to collect all this documentation to prove, you know, to get her birth certificate recorded. And so I looked it up, and it said a delayed birth certificate is one that is filed over a year since the birth happened. So unless they file it in that first year, after somebody's 1 year old, you have to file a delayed birth certificate. So if you can't find it at the time of the event, that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't exist. It might be out there. Marriage records. Okay, marriage records are wonderful because, again, they list the parents and oftentimes the mother's maiden name. When you check a marriage record, often check the witnesses who also signed and watched the wedding. They're often usually family members or close friends to the people. It'll give you oftentimes the occupation of the people, if they were married before, and if they're not, if they were, are they still, you know, widowed, divorced, you know, kind of give you some insights into that. Marriage records can look different, you know, and just because someone files for a license doesn't necessarily mean that they actually got married, okay? I found a license for marriage, and then 6 months later I found another same couple, another license for marriage, and then they actually got married. I don't know what caused the wedding delay. Maybe they had a fight, maybe there was a death in the family. I don't know, you know, but they ended up getting married but later. So you can't always take the license as, you know, the date, but it's a good clue, you know, that, hey, if they filed for a license, maybe they did get married. This is out of a book from Randolph and Cattaraugus, and so this is, so, you know, from towns, they would often keep a big book like that they'd fill in rather than doing a separate certificate. And this happens to be the only time I've ever seen my great-great-grandfather's middle name, ever. Like, this record is the only record I've come across, you know. You never know what little clue you might pick up, that this was his second wedding. And actually, I didn't have a picture of them getting married. That's him and his first wife. The record's him and his second wife, but I couldn't get it because he's got that cool mustache. But you can see, you know, that's her first marriage, even though it's his second. I think he was a widower. And that, you know, it has the mother's maiden names for both of them. So that's a very helpful clue. You can also find marriage records in church. I showed you the one little notation on a birth record. People might have these around as well, which will give you a clue as to where it happened. And, you know, if they got married at a certain church, maybe they had children baptized there, and you can find those records in those books and things like that. Maybe they're buried at that church. You know, so if you can kind of connect to that church, it'll help you maybe find some more records. Death certificates. So a typical death certificate, this is from the city of Buffalo, would kind of look like this. That's the full thing. I broke it down into small chunks to help you guys see. So this is the top. It lists where she passed away, her name, what was her residence, and then how old she was when she died, and the days, month, and year. This is the center section of it, and so again, it gives her a couple things about her, her sex, her color, if she was married, what was her spouse's name, her date of birth. Again, it repeats the age, date, and year that she lived, what was her occupation, and then kind of down, her birthplace. Under here, it says, you know, father, birthplace of father, mother's maiden name, and the birthplace of the mother. And then this is where it gets a little well, you have to really know. The above is true to the best of my knowledge and signed. Okay, so it's a good clue, but it's a secondary source because her husband is the one that's giving the information. It's not her parents, you know, the ones that, you know, are actually the event happened to. It's her husband. Now remember, a lot of times I had one where his wife passed away. They were married for 33 years. He wrote for the parents, don't know, don't know. Tell me after 33 years you lived in the same town, you didn't know your in-laws, you know. But you're under distress, you're sad. It's a very difficult time. And so you may get lucky, you may not. It could be incorrect information, you know, but you could get lucky. On the right-hand side, that's the cause of death. That's where it's more of a primary source. It's the how long the person was sick according to the doctor, what they had passed away from, things like that. Then at the bottom left hand, this is a good clue. It even puts where are they being buried. And so, because oftentimes people are buried in a family plot, you can find other people together. So once you find that cemetery, that's another clue to lead you to family. Yes?
Who has access to get copies of death certificates?
If it's over the 50 years.
Anyone can go in and say, I want a copy of your
Yeah.
death? Really?
If it's over 50 years, yeah. For genealogical purposes, and it's $10 if you order it from the place. Sometimes it's $1. I've paid 25 cents for the copy. Or if you request it from Albany because they're duplicated with the State Department of Health, it's 22. Am I right about that? $22, I think, in 8 months to get that. Or actually, I think some have come in at 4. How many months have some people waited for a marriage or birth from Albany? I waited 8. No one else? Yeah, about that much too. Yeah, so 5 months? Yeah, so sometimes it can take a little while. There's a backlog. Cemetery records can also lead you to other things if you can have the opportunity to go to the cemetery. I had some family buried in the Mount Calvary group, which is the United French and German and all, you know, the 5 cemeteries that are connected. And I kind of got lucky because the girl working at the counter I went to high school with, and I was in the same class as her sister, and so she was just gabbing away, and I was just, oh, and can I see that? And I'm like, shh. Oh yeah, and how's Carrie doing? Shh. And how long have you worked here? Okay, and I was just taking picture. And so one of the people in my family, little Clara, she passed away. She was only 2 months old. But then on the record, it said her church was St. Anne's. So then I went over to the Grosvenor room, and I was able to find her death record in their church death book, you know, and things like that. And then when I knew that she was at St. Anne's, and she was only 2 months old, I found her birth record there, and you know, things like that in the same microfilm. So one clue at one place might lead you to another. So always collect as much as you can. Cemetery records, a lot of times they'll have an individual card for each person or some sort of record. That's part of where I was talking to her, and I was just flipping cards. She brought out the whole surname for me of what I was researching. You may or may not get that when you go. You could always try to call ahead and be like, I'd like to come. When would be a good time for you? You know that you don't want to bother them if it's going to be a busy time, type of thing. You know, you might not be able to get the whole surname list, maybe just the one card that you're looking for. But then also in their books, they usually often also have a family plot book or sheet of paper or something that shows, you know, who is all buried there. So in this one, it had a picture at the top and a drawing of where the graves were numbered, and the number correlates to the people in the family plot. Okay, so then if I turn this picture, and if I look at 11 is Margaret. Now she was married twice, so Gruber was the name she passed away, but she was buried with her first husband. So the 11, I turned the picture, there's Margaret Goldwitzer in the Goldwitzer plot with all the other people. And so I can see, do you see how ones are marked with boxes? That often indicates a headstone. Now they didn't color in one for Margaret, but she obviously has one. It's not a perfect system, but it helps you, you know, and to know why. I couldn't find little Clara that passed away when she was 2 months because she doesn't have a headstone. If I didn't see that book, I wouldn't have known she existed because she didn't make a census, you know, in the 2 months that she was alive, you know, things like that. Like, if she wasn't buried, there wouldn't be a record, you know, that I could have easily found. But now I do know Clara, you know, look. If you're looking to try to find what cemetery your ancestors might be buried in, Find a Grave is a very popular one that we use. On the handout that says beginning websites, There's got to be a category that says cemetery. I've got some listed there, and Find a Grave is one of them. It's a volunteer website. It has over 100 million memorials listed on it, so you might get lucky.
You just want to make a caution that those are all voluntarily entered. So if you're looking at a cemetery, I've had a lot of people, like St. Patrick's Cemetery here in Lockwood, for example. You go to Find a Grave on that website, there's only about 2,500 burials listed. And actually in that cemetery, there's probably over 10,000. So you've got to have caution to say when you're looking at that cemetery, they're not all listed on that Find a Grave. There's a portion of them. You want to get lucky, they might be in there, but don't assume because you don't see it on that website that they're not there.
Right, and then check back, because as she says, it's volunteers. Many of us, and I've met Barbara and Cindy, like, hey, you want to meet at the cemetery on Saturday at 10? We'll go with our cameras, with our phones, click a bunch of headstones in and upload it. And so if you do a search and you're like, I know this person's buried in the cemetery, maybe we haven't gotten to that headstone yet, or maybe they don't actually have a headstone, you know, and things like that. But hey, that might show up in 3 months, might show up in 6 months or next year, you know, so continue to go back and kind of check the website frequently for names that you're stuck and trying to find. Continuing on with the death is wills and probate. You know, last will and testament is a person where they're saying, you know, who they would like to leave their possessions to or things like that. Probate is when the court allows the will, the death has been proved and that the will can proceed and that the estate can be taken care of. They can find good clues within will and probate. I spent Christmas break down in the Buffalo, Erie County Courthouse. They have the surrogates court, and I had ordered them because they're kept off-site. So I had to order it ahead of time for them to get shipped in. And I found part of the estate, you know, so Barbara had inherited the family home from her mother. And so when both Barbara and John had passed away, their kids they didn't want to live in the house, they wanted to sell it, so they had to get it appraised. So that they knew, you know, like what to sell it for so they could divvy up the money between the heirs. In the appraisal, there was 2 guys that came to the house and described in detail the size of the rooms, the condition of the house, which was deplorable. You know, the family that lived upstairs, which was a relative, and all these things like that. But the guy even took pictures. This house is torn down. My family lived in this house from the 1880s to the 1960s. My dad, when he was born, lived in that house. I never saw that house. I never knew pictures existed. And I found it stuck in this appraisal in the probate. You know, and now I can envision, you know, like I can see enough of like, okay, because they described where the rooms are. I can blueprint kind of, you know, because there's 13 people living in that house at one point. Where did they sleep? Like I was just always so fascinated by this residence. Because so many family members live there. I think I've counted 17 so far of people I know that have lived there that were in my family. Wills and probate will help you, you know, maybe find things like that. But just also recently, so the will that was in for another person, he signed it in 1881. I got to hold that, my 3rd-time great-grandfather's, the same paper that he held in 1881 in my hands, that he signed. Like, I just sat there for a second, just to touch something that he touched, of someone that I will never meet, you know, except for through my genealogy. It's a wonderful resource of records to go through. And oftentimes they're great clues. I'll kind of go back to this slide. It'll list, you know, in your will, you know, I give, devise, and bequeath all of my property, both real and personal, of every name and nature, and wheresoever situated, to my children, Mrs. Martha Getz, and Matthew and George Eckert, share and share alike. a lot of times they'll list their children and grandchildren, the people that they want to or not want to leave. As I found in one of the wills, you know, it is my intention to not give anything to my son Peter. You know, and kind of wonder like, well, was there a problem in the family, or was just Peter more well off than the others and she felt comfortable that he didn't need it? You know, like kind of, but using the wills and probate will help you find those errors going down, which might help you find your way back up. Where you're able to find some are online. This is some screenshots from FamilySearch.org. It's a free website. It's the largest free database, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. But if you go to the New York State probate records, they have over 14 million images that you can search through. You can't search it by name, but you can browse page by page as if you were flipping the pages in a book. What you want to do, I was able to narrow this down to just Niagara County. These are the books, not even the whole page, the books that they microfilmed from Niagara County wills and probate. And so you want to find, wherever it is in the whole big list, the index. You want to find the index, find the person's name, and then it will say their will was recorded in book this on page this. Then you find, I need book J5, you know what I mean? Like, and then it'll help you narrow it down. So don't get overwhelmed by how many different books they've microfilmed. Find the index first, search for the person's name, and then it'll lead you to the rest. If it's not up there, as far as what they've microfilmed, then you have to go to the place. You know, just like how I went to the Erie County Courthouse, because they had the index, but they didn't have all of it microfilmed yet, you know, and so I was able, you know, I went because I happened to live close. If you don't happen to live nearby the place that you're hoping to research and you don't want to go on a trip, there's a website called Random Acts of Genealogical Kindness, RAOGK, Random Acts of Genealogical Kindness. You can ask a volunteer that happens to live in that area to please do so for you. And they would often just charge you for the copies, you know, and then if somebody does that, you know, pay it forward. Then maybe if somebody's looking for something in Niagara County and they live in Arkansas, you know, like then maybe you can sign up to fill one of those volunteer requests and help that person out. So that's one way that you can get those records if they're not online yet. Sticking with the death, let's talk about Social Security a little bit. So Social Security was passed by law in 1935 and enacted in 1937. And the bulk of it is that if you were a working person, you were required to put in an application for Social Security. This isn't necessarily, that's not black and white. There were exceptions, you know, if you weren't working, if you were a farmer, things like that. But the bulk of workers did all complete this. And you were assigned a Social Security number. How is this helpful? Well, when they applied, they put down useful information. But then also, we all have individual Social Security numbers. None of us have two alike. So if we were looking, this is my grandmother. Now that she's passed away, her Social Security number is not going to be used by anyone else. So the government feels safe to throw them out there because it's useless, it's null at this point. But they had on record her birth and death date. Okay, so you can use the Social Security Death Index to try to find some of the dates of the people that you're trying to, you might be missing her birth or somebody's, death date. The ones that are online are from 1962 to 2014 right now. It's not that the ones from 37 to 62 aren't there, it's just that they weren't computerized and uploaded. But if you're looking for someone that may have passed away between 1962 and a couple of years ago, you can probably find their name on the Social Security Death Index. So that is a resource to help you find some dates. When they filled out the application, this is not available online. You have to order it as part of the Freedom of Information Act through the Social Security office, Social Security.
Administration.
Yeah, thank you. When they filled it out, they filled out a form that was called an SS5. So when my great-grandmother signed up for her Social Security number, she put her full name, including her maiden name, her address, she was unemployed. I don't know why she filled it out because she was unemployed, but she was abandoned, so maybe she was trying to draft already on it, you know, just having a single mom trying to take care of her family. I'm not sure of the situation. But it has her birthday, where she was born, and then her parents' names, and her mother's maiden name. That was the first time I saw those names when I got this record. And so they filled it out, and then in the upper right hand, they wrote the Social Security number that they had assigned her. I don't see that on all of them, but on hers they did. So a person applied for Social Security, so this is another record that you can order through the Social Security Administration website. It will cost $27 if you know the date that the person died, $29 if you don't. And that's available through Freedom of Information.
What year did Social Security number start?
1937. Okay, another type of record. Go ahead.
If somebody, well, I'm assuming they were all naturalized by then, but they can't be naturalized yet that way.
Cool, I don't know the answer to. Did a person have to be a legal citizen to have Social Security, or could an alien? I don't know the answer.
I think
What
you had to
about
be a
now?
citizen.
Yeah,
I think one of the reasons I think to get to apply, you had to produce original documents to get that. So you had to show, I believe, that you were a citizen and that you had to produce a birth certificate.
yeah, because why would you be able to earn?
that, yeah.
Yeah, kind of a double, because it'll still be taken out of your paycheck, but you won't be able to draw on it later in life. Like, so becoming a citizen would be a,
You could have a green card and still apply for Social Security and draw Social Security if you're an employee.
If you ever paid into it.
Is it always-
If you paid into it, right.
Right.
You could have a green card, work, pay into it, draw Social Security, and still not be a U.S. citizen, but have.
Has it always been that way, Ken?
I don't know.
and I know too
But I do know
that,
you have to provide a
right.
birth certificate.
And you might find a woman applied for it that never worked if she was a housewife, but her husband passed away and she wanted to draw his Social Security. You know, so there's reasons that, you know, different reasons why people apply. Moving on to the next type of record group are directories. It's kind of similar to what a phone book is, except for back, you know, prior to when they were really using phones all that much. It was a way to just, a big address book for the place that people lived. What's great about these is that the census were done, you know, by the government every 10 years. So 1900, 1910, 1920, and if you happen to be researching people in New York State, there was a state census in between 1905, 1915, 1925, you know, so, but there's still a 5-year gap. Directories were often published unless it was like wartime every year. And so it was a, you know, if you know that somebody was there in the 1920 census, but they weren't there in the 1930 census, you can check each year in the directory and, you know, okay, there's Max in 1921, there's Max in 22. Uh-oh, Max isn't there in 23, but his wife is listed, and she's listed as widowed. You know, so that helps you kind of pinpoint that date as to maybe when somebody passed away. Here's a couple examples. Oh, kind of just exactly what I said. In 1927, you can see Frank Sheliga. Kind of highlighted, he lived at 162 Lovejoy. In 1934, here's Carolyn, she's widowed by Frank. Okay, so it'll help you find names. That was the first time, often women were, they went by their husband's names. She would have been Mrs. Frank Sheliga. You know, it was almost like she didn't have her own first name. Somebody in the NT genealogy group, that was the only time they ever found, I think, her great-grandmother's first name was an instance like that out of a directory.
Do they still do directories?
Yes.
Oh, they do?
Like Blackport still has a city
Mhm.
clerk?
Yeah, yeah. And they are, yeah.
You know, sometimes I have found death dates in those and where they moved to.
Yes.
So they say removed to.
Yeah,
So I was trying to find one relative, and I'm like, where'd they go after they lived here? Well, one time we moved to in some place in Indiana, and they're like, whoa, you know,
Yeah.
or died, they give you the date. I have found, you know, now
I have not found that.
it's a secondary source for those, but boy, it's a pretty big clue.
Yeah.
Still in print?
Yeah.
Or are they?
Yeah, they're in print.
And
We have
they're
a-
here at the library?
Yes, on the third floor.
Yeah, and we have them in our library
That's what I was
too.
gonna say too.
In
Yeah.
our 215 Niagara Street, we have them there.
What were you gonna ask?
That's what I was gonna ask, where are these directories? So
Yeah,
there
there,
are
if
some
you
here?
if you go
Yes,
upstairs
it
to
is.
the rare book room upstairs on the third floor of this library, you can find the Lockport ones. So, but Lockport is only going to kind of carry what's in its area. You know, if you want the North Tonawanda, you got to kind of go to their libraries or the county historian. A lot of them have been digitized and can be found
So-
online.
So it's by the location of the
Yes.
library.
There's a
Well,
lot of those on the FamilySearch.org has a lot of city directories that are digitized, and especially Niagara County. Yep.
How interesting that you said that, because I haven't found them on FamilySearch, but I know they're on Ancestry. So I must not
I've
have.
been tooling around there lately, so I know.
I'll show you
this
kind
morning.
of where, a little bit of where you can find these, that you can find. But they're a wonderful resource and helpful for other things too. If your family owned a business, you know, you'll find the businesses advertised in there. What's neat about it too is how we were talking about people with the same first name. Knowing their occupation can help you know which one is which. And here, so we've got 3 John Hetzels. There's a finisher. He resides at 332 Hampshire. Here's John. He's a machinist or mechanic. He resided at 842 Smith. Now his son John Jr. is a music teacher that resigned at 842 Smith. So knowing which occupation each one is will help you find the records of which one is which.
And those, Adam Hetzel,
Mm-hmm.
all of those underneath are,
Hetzels, that's why they have the, sometimes they put out, but saving, type of thing. So, yeah, so directories are a great resource.
The counties, like farmers, they didn't do anything.
Sometimes you would find suburbs, like in the big city ones, there'll be a couple pages.
Like I'm talking farmers and agriculture.
Most likely not. They are city directories, but yes.
In the early Lockport ones, I have found my people from Wheatfield, North Tonawanda in the Lockport ones. Those are, but way, back in the 1800s. Because they listed all the little, Lockport would have listed all the little burgs around. You just don't know what's,
So Lockport was bigger than North Tonawanda, is that why?
well, this is probably before Lockport, the North Tonawanda expanded. What I'm thinking of is the town of Wheatfield, and part of the town of Wheatfield was added to North Tonawanda.
So they're in the,
You know what else is interesting about these two is that if you, what you'll notice that in a family, all of a sudden a woman will show up in here. And they would be called like a board,
And what's interesting,
rumor underneath a particular person's name, but now the wife wouldn't be in there, the father would be in there. You wouldn't know whether the wife was alive or dead, but though if they were a girl and they turned, I believe it was 18 was the kind of magical age, they would show up in the directory as, boarding or, residing in that home. And you can now begin to say, oh, that was you can find sometimes you're making some assumptions, you gotta track it down, but find family members or at least, cousins or somebody, especially women. Women are so hard to find, sometimes especially, but the girls will show up, the daughters will show up.
Yeah, kind of in that in between when they become adult before they get married. That
Yeah,
little
once they're
kind of
married, they're out of there
span. Yeah,
again.
moving along, some other records that might help you in your genealogical research would be military records. And so there was a family history done on my mother's side of the family back in the 1930s. And what she wrote up about Josiah, now again, I did not have this picture. I connected with someone through Ancestry.com that had, remember I said about Plinko? They're the ones that received this picture and shared it with me. And so just a little bit in the second paragraph, Josiah Harding before the Civil War was Inspector General of Pennsylvania State Militia. At the outbreak of the Civil War, he was the first volunteer in Pennsylvania. The archives at Harrisburg bear this out. He recruited and trained 600 men 10 was given a commission of Major General. His troops were stationed at Troy, PA. Well, okay then. I'm like, this is cool, you know, like, I want to find out what the archives at Harrisburg bear this out. So there's got to be some sort of list that says, I volunteered to be in the Civil War, and I'm going to find Josiah's name, the first one signed there, right? So I did what any other genealogical nut would do. I drove to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I went to the state archives, and so I did lots of searching, and sadly enough, Josiah, yes, he was a Major General. I found records of him. He started off as a lieutenant, kind of went up, you know, to the 13th Infantry where he was the Major General. But the more records I found, he was not the first to volunteer. He was in the militia, not even in the Pennsylvania, like the Union Army. He was in the state militia. And by the time he got his troops together and to Troy, everyone else had already left for the war, and they said, we don't need you, and they sent him back, and all of his men got mad at him and everything like that. So, but in the story, I was the first to volunteer, and even in his obituary, he was a renowned, he was a general. But yeah, a little bit. You know, you can take things, you know, and then find some truth and, you know, something like that, but then always try to find documentation to go along with it. You know, so when you're researching for things.
Are military records public records also?
Oh, yeah.
Like discharge papers and those are?
Yeah, those are recorded at the county. I'm not sure if there's any sort of privacy, oh, there's a fee. Like as far as the years until you can get them. Because I know my grandfather, he had a copy of his DD, was it DD 214 or DD, yeah. And when he got home, we still have his, but they were all told, when you get home, you put this on file at the county clerk. And so there is a file also recorded, you know, a copy of it. But I'm not sure, I haven't looked into if I could request other people's. It's a good question.
Yeah.
Other type of military records that might help you with your genealogy research is people who are drawing pensions after the war. Josiah from the last slide, his dad was in the Revolutionary War. And so I knew that he was drawing a pension, and I found a newspaper article of these people that found an old yellowed piece of paper, and they were saying it was a letter that he was writing. They weren't related to him or anything. It was, I think they were in a law office or something, and how he was complaining that his Revolutionary War pension was little better than nothing. And so, you know, like, you can sometimes find newspaper articles that will correspond with, you know, the pension records. But as far as pension records go, you know, they're on file with NARA, the National Archives, and you can order. And sometimes, from what I understand, I haven't done it yet. It is a little bit more expensive, like in the $50 to $60 range or $70 range. But you can get, like, you know, a couple sheets of paper. It could be a, you know, a couple-inch file, because depending on who, you know, say a wife then was, or the children were trying to get the military pension because the dad had passed away, they had to prove their lineage to him, and they had to come up with affidavits and things like that would prove the relationship for them to try to get the pension. So, you know, and even if you watch, you know, who do you think you are and things like that, you know, they find Civil War pictures in there. You know, of course, like, that would never happen to me. Or, I don't know, I found those house pictures, but you never know what might be in those files if you wanted to order something from the National Archives. And that's under the Veteran Service Records, kind of in there, and you have to complete the form. Other types of military records that might help your genealogy research would be draft cards. For World War I and World War II. What was interesting about these, you know, they put the address that they lived, the date that they were born, and then what was their occupation, who did they have to support, you know, like, were you married, did you have kids, type of thing. And then also a little bit of a self-description, you know, like about the person over here, you know, like, are you tall, medium, or short? How's your build? Are you slender? You know, color of your eyes, color of your hair. I have no idea what John looks like, but now I kind of do a little bit. He had brown hair and brown eyes, and also he was not strong and flat-footed, and he had one toe on his left foot that was crippled. Yes.
One thing I have noticed on I've noticed on the World War I record, that sometimes they would give the date of their birth and the month of their birth accurately. But the year would be off by a couple, whether they wanted to get in or stay out. You know, I don't know if they had to take an oath that they were.
Yeah, good point.
Where would you access those?
Those are, I got that off Ancestry, and I can show you how and where to get to that for free. Are they on FamilySearch, the draft cards? Anyone?
I would try.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have in our library World War I. We have the original binder. It's about that big, about that wide, and it's all the World War I draft registrations for Niagara County. So if you're, it's page by page, and it's kind of arranged by, I believe, township and cityship, and then alphabetically after that. So that's a great. And it's all the original typing on these huge ledgers.
Wow.
In World War II as well?
No, just one. Just World War I.
Yes.
For World War I draft, did everyone have to fill these out? Or if they were alien or not?
Yes,
Was that a
because it asked
volunteer?
if they're a citizen or not, I
No,
believe.
but what I'm saying, was it like a mandatory thing?
I know World War II has been.
No, I'm talking about like World War I. If my grandparents came over and they weren't citizens.
It's a good question. Barbara, do you know the answer?
I think so. I always assumed my father did not serve, although he was of age. He was the only male on a farm and was responsible for aging, and ever. And I just assumed he never filled it out. But I found his draft card on Ancestry. He did fill it out, so it must have been mandatory.
Okay,
I'm
and where
not
do you find these? You have a,
We have World War I at our library on Niagara Street.
where's that?
Where's that?
215 Niagara,
I'll
upstairs.
show you later in the
Okay,
slide. But this was found on Ancestry.com, and there's ways to get to it for free, which I'll show you later in the presentation.
Okay.
So now that we've talked about kind of all these different records, census, directories, birth, marriage, death, military, start timelining the answers that you're researching. Kind of draw it out, kind of be like, okay, I know they were born here and they died here, and even think about the world events, such as World War I. Did they live through that? Did they, what happened in their life? Did they immigrate? What country did they come from? And maybe what happened in that year? Did they immigrate? Was there a reason? And things like that. And then start to once you kind of plot out what you do have, start to realize what you don't have, and start to question like, oh yeah, I don't have their marriage date. And try to get an idea like, well, I know their first child was born here, so it's a good guess that they were married before that, and start to narrow it down. So if you put it in that order, that can kind of help you to figure that out. Another thing to talk about real quick is cluster and collateral research. Cluster research is research technique employed by genealogists to learn more about an ancestor by examining records left by the ancestor's cluster. Person's cluster consists of their extended family, their friends, their neighbors, and other associates such as business partners. So associate around them. Collateral is when you're used to, you're going down a sibling's kid, the descendant of a brother or a sister of an ancestor, because that Plinko thing that I mentioned a couple times, if you work down, that might help you work back up. There are 4 kind of huge genealogy giants as far as websites go. And this is as of April 2017. I purchased this from Genealogy Gems. It says Ancestry has 10 billion records. FamilySearch has 5.5 billion. Find My Past has 8 billion, and MyHeritage has 4 billion. Okay, as far as records. Now, Ancestry is paid. Find My Past is paid. MyHeritage is a paid site. FamilySearch is the free site. So you can access that from home easily, and I'll show you a little bit how to do it. Ancestry is the largest What's nice about it is that you can put your own tree on there and work on your tree. You can connect with others, and we'll talk about that a little bit. FamilySearch, you can also upload your own tree, but they want it one collective tree. So if you and I find that we have a common ancestor, we're going to work on that person together. We don't want to have 2 copies of that person in this one big row tree. By My Past is more geared towards England and kind of things like that, so I'm not going to go into that one. My Heritage kind of started off as more of a social media kind of website. They have, look at this, Ancestry has 2.5 million paid subscribers for their 10 billion records. My Heritage has 88 million subscribers. So that's where you're going to really connect with cousins. They might not necessarily be doing their genealogy very hard, but it could help you find somebody there. And they're really trying to beef up. They just added DNA to their website to, try to start to compete more with Ancestry. So let's talk about Ancestry a little bit. I kind of mentioned this stuff. Yeah, I got that slide. There we go. There is what's called Ancestry Library Edition. And libraries can subscribe to it. And it's not the full website. It doesn't have all the records, but it's got a good bunch of them. And you can't upload your individual tree, but you can search the records. Some of the libraries in Niagara, some of the smaller ones might have it, but I know for certain that the 3 big ones, the North Tonawanda, Niagara Falls, and Lockport Library all have Ancestry Library Edition. Newfane has it, yeah. So when you're in the Lockport Library, such as here, you can even bring your own laptop. They have it configured that it's through the Wi-Fi, so as long as you're within under their roof, you can work on it from your laptop. Otherwise, you can sign into one of their computers, which is how you have to do it at the NT Library. What they have on there for Ancestry Library Edition are the census records, border crossings, the New York State Census, passenger list, those military records, so when I was mentioning those draft cards. So it's on free at the library, the directories, lots and lots of directories and yearbooks. Those are all available through the Ancestry Library Edition that you can get right here in this building. You do have to come here. You can't access it remotely from home, though. You have to be in the library to do so. Yes?
Passenger lists from, like, overseas?
Yeah, when they're coming to Ellis
okay.
Island, those passenger list type of thing. Yes?
Place before Ellis Island, I always forget.
Newcastle, New Garden, what am I?
Castle Garden.
Thank you. Castle Garden.
Do you know if any of those records are available?
I didn't look into the passenger list. It's worth a shot.
What's that called?
Castle Garden.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, I was mixing. There's no new about it.
That was
Do you
before
know
Ellis Island.
when Ellis Island started?
1892.
1892.
On the beginning websites thing, I think there's a little area of immigration. And so there's the Castle Garden website there and the Ellis Island website. It's right on your handout right there under immigration. There's another way to get into some of the ancestry records from your home. They made a deal with the New York State Archives. They said, hey, give us your records. And New York State Archives said, sure, but you're going to put them online for free so that New York State residents can look at them. And Ancestry went, okay. So if you go to the archives.nicex.gov website, and that's on your handout, and then here's what the page looks like. And if you go to ancestry.com, New York, okay, if you click on that, it brings you to this page. And there's a little video to watch because Ancestry, you do have to create a free account. You have to in order to look in the record. So they even have a video that shows you how to do it. Once you got the video and you're ready to go, you just scroll down, you put in your zip code, and then you can look at the records on Ancestry through New York State that they've shared. Now again, it's not everything, but it might be the collection you're looking for, and you can do this from home. So here's the collections that are in that. Some of the census records, New York Civil War muster roll abstracts, some various things in there that might be exactly what you were hoping for, and you can look at that from home for free. And that link is on the handouts. One neat thing about Ancestry, it's the largest DNA database. How many in here has done a DNA thing? So they went from this past year from having 3 billion people that have done it to 6 billion. And it was one of the most popular Christmas presents this past December. So I'm thinking that number's gonna hike up. I have really had good luck connecting with cousins through this. And even if they're not an Ancestry subscriber, you can email them. You know, like if our DNA connects and we're cousins, and you can correspond that way. So it's a neat feature that Ancestry has. It is a subscription site. For 6 months for US, it's $99. $150 if you want the world records too. And then $200 for 6 months if you want access to some of their sister websites as well. You could get access to newspapers.com, access to military records on Fold 3, you get a special 800 number. You know, there's some options available should you want to subscribe to it. If you were to do the world one, which is $150 for 6 months, it's $300 a year. You can look at it as kind of like $1 a day. You know, like as far as access to it. Yes?
You as a professional, which one would you recommend?
I've stayed on the US for quite some time because I'm still having fun here. I am currently on the world right now because there were some records we wanted to get at, but I will, after the 6 months, I'll flip back, let them add some more, and then in a year or so, I'll up it again and check out what's new, and then flip back down. Also, if any of you are AARP members, I believe you get, for first-time subscribers, you get like 30% off of your subscription.
You know, if money's an issue for you, which, you know, it is for a lot of people who are doing this, they're unlimited incomes. And before you know if you really want to do this, I always suggest go to FamilySearch.org. It's free.
That's next.
You saw honey, there's lots of records. I'd start there and see how interested you are in doing this, you know, because, you know, don't be spending all the money and go, you know, this is really a pain in the neck. Or, you know, you might decide after using the free site. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I just joined Ancestry, within a year. And I didn't, so I'm not going to spend that kind of money, but I have done obviously my diligence.
You know, but FamilySearch is a place in Williamsville.
Yes, I'll be getting, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Can you put, with the free Ancestry, can you put your tree on there?
No.
No, you can't.
In order to put your tree on, you have to be a subscribed member.
Okay.
And, well, I won't get to the, I used to have a slide for that, but I took it out for this because I'm already over time. But I will talk about FamilySearch. So this is the one that Shelley was just talking. It's the largest free database that's available. And it is required now for you to look at records that you have to create a free account. It's safe to do so. But then once you do, you can open up all the records, the millions of records they have available, and you can also upload a tree and start working for free of tree, and they have wonderful resources. To use the website, yes?
One thing about, I started a small tree at FamilySearch, and people are clicking into it and changing it and not being careful. And you can go in and talk people, this is, but be careful, because there are some, what people are saying, it's not genealogy, it's clickology.
It's two different philosophies, whereas if you pay for Ancestry, that's your tree and nobody can edit it unless you give them the ability to. But it's the one tree, it's your tree. It's not going to grow past what you've found. On FamilySearch, it's one world tree. So while you're working up here, and say you're working up here and you've done a little bit more and I connect into what you've done, how amazing it is that it opens up like that. Whereas in Ancestry, I have to be the one branching out. And so it's different philosophies. I have a tree on both to connect, with both. So to do some searching on FamilySearch, it's free to do from home. What I like to do is I go to search records right off their site, and then it brings you to this page. Now you can put in a person's name, and it will bring back all of the records that they find on that name. But say you wanted to just specifically check one type of record. You're looking for somebody in the Social Security Death Index. You're looking for somebody's census records, thing like that. You can go to Browse All Published Collections right there. It'll take you to a page that looks like this. Okay, so you can do a search for a collection like that. You can see that they have over 2,000 collections from all over the world, and it'll put the date that it was last updated. You can narrow it down by clicking in, say you wanted to just look at what they have available for New York State. You can click into United States and then select New York. And they have 51 collections of just New York State records, including those probate records that we're talking about. They've got marriage records, land records, all sorts of stuff. Now there's a difference between what type of records they have. As far as if there's a number and it's not clickable here, that means that those have been indexed. That somebody has read the document and typed all the names so that you can just do like similar to a Google search and pull it up. The ones that say browse images means they got it there, but it's like a book and you have to flip page by page to find the information because volunteers haven't yet indexed the names on it. But the records are there for you to see and to flip through. So that's how you would, yeah?
When you get the record out, how do you save it on your computer?
Each computer is different. There's often like a download button or right click, and then save file as. Yeah.
Okay.
They're often PDFs.
Okay. Thank you.
And then you can save it right to your computer. And as we talked a little bit about, you can upload your family tree onto FamilySearch. Sorry, I'm going to try and move you along. I'll go faster. MyHeritage is one of the other big websites that I was talking about. If you go to the final page in your handout, the North Tonawanda Library subscribes to it, and they encourage their members to use it to justify them spending the money. And even though this is through the Niagara County Genealogical Society, I thought I would share it with you. And should you not have a North Tonawanda Public Library card, that's my grandpa's number. Write it down. So you can go on to MyHeritage from home through the NT Public Library, and the directions are right there. And they have millions of records on there that you can search through. And they might have different collections than Ancestry, and they might have different collections than FamilySearch, and you might find the record that you're looking for that's going to help answer your thing. So the number, if you want to double check, 2412-0000-766-707.
I've told this story before, but I'll share it. After hearing the presentation about MyHeritage at the NT Library, I went home, typed in my number, and I found a picked photograph of my great-grandfather's sister in Norway. I mean, I knew who she was, I had her on my tree. After a lot, I could not contact the person because the library edition did not allow me. If I was a member, I could have, but through other devious methods, I found him, and we're now Facebook friends.
Yeah. Awesome. So again, it's a way to work around if you're not ready to subscribe. You can't upload your tree because you're going in through the library edition and all the collections won't be open to you. But while you're just getting started, take advantage and dig through all the free stuff. And then if you're hooked and ready to subscribe, then go for it. And here's another wonderful way to get at millions of records.
Is it a membership?
So you can
Well, the library edition is absolutely free because NT is paying for it, the NT library. But if you wanted to subscribe to, yes, you would pay. And I don't know the figure,
Yeah,
but
but I mean
it's,
this number right here, this.
that's Grandpa's library card.
Oh, so that's to get into the.
The website. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So North Tonawanda has MyHeritage, and then like Erie County would have an Ancestry? Is that what you're saying?
Well, each library buys different subscriptions. Like
Right.
the Lockport Library purchases Ancestry Library Edition. Like they subscribe to it. North Tonawanda does both Ancestry Library Edition and MyHeritage.
Okay, so with this number you can get into Ancestry and Heritage?
No, just MyHeritage.
Oh.
If for Ancestry, you have to be in the building.
Oh, okay.
MyHeritage you can access remotely.
From home.
Yes. This is the one that you through the NT, so follow the handout. You have to go to the NT webpage and follow the links, and then to get in, because it's meant for NT library members, that's where you punch in an NT library card.
Okay.
And Grandpa's happy to share it with all of you.
Thank you.
I think I think it's also Wheatfield and Pendleton, because I can do it and I'm in Wheatfield.
Yeah, but my card says NT on the front of it.
It says NT,
Yeah.
but I think NT,
It's where you signed up for your library card.
but I don't,
Because this is the 14120 is the beginning of the NT.
but I think, but I think mine is 24120.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's the same.
but I don't live in North Tonawanda, that's what I'm
But that's
saying.
your home library in the
Yes,
Niagara system.
yes.
It's your home, like, so
Yeah.
if I signed up for a library card at Lockport, I would have a Lockport number.
But I think if you live in Wheatfield or Pendleton, you get.
Right, because that's your home
Yeah,
library. It doesn't, that library
Yeah,
covers your residence.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, moving faster. So, local records, local resources. There's so many, we've talked about them, and I can't, there's the Western New York Genealogical Society, the Polish Genealogical Society, the Buffalo Irish Genealogical Society. There's so many county historians and so many wonderful groups that we have available to us. I'm just going to kind of touch on a couple that are around, have a couple programs close, which is us. You found us. Thank you. So we're the Niagara County Genealogical Society. We're located at 215 Niagara Street here in Lockport. And Shelley said at the beginning of the session, we do have our library open hours on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays from 1 to 4:45. And it's upstairs of that building. And you can come research, amongst our library things. You can have the research librarian give you a hand. We also pay for a subscription, just how I was saying, like the NT library pays for this, the Lockport library pays for this. We pay for American Ancestors. And so when you come to our library, you can access the New England Historical Genealogical Society's website and do any research from there, from our library. You cannot do it remotely. You have to come into our library to get access to that. So that is a wonderful resource in addition to all the books that we have that we can offer you. We offer programs like this for free coming up. The next one we have is Saturday, February 24th, and we're kind of doing a Lisa Louise Cook lock-in. We love her. She came to speak to our group a couple years ago. She has many high-quality videos, and we're going to show 3 or 4 short videos kind of throughout the thing. We're going to sit and watch, and I learned some stuff from her. And then our next program meeting is Wednesday, March 28th at 7 p.m. And I believe, Cindy, you're one of the presenters for that?
Yes.
That's going to be dating photos through fashion. Mm-hmm. And I saw her give this presentation before, and it was wonderful. She had lots of examples of what, if a person's wearing a high collar dress, kind of things like this, it's probably from this time frame, so help you with that. It's a wonderful thing. Many of us in here, 1, 2, 3, 3 of us, are part of the North Tonawanda Library Genealogical Genealogy Club. We meet usually the first or second Saturday, depending on my schedule, for free out of the NT library. And coming up in February on the 10th, I will be presenting on the FamilySearch website that we talked about a bit. And I'm going to kind of go from a beginner to a more in-depth, kind of more advanced, so hang on to your seats if you're still on the beginner side. But then on Wednesday, we're going to have a guest speaker, Ward Bray. He's going to come and talk about how to research church records, for your genealogy. So those are available at the NT Library. You're welcome to come and join us. Okay, Brooke? Another local resource we've got right here in this building. They have oftentimes genealogy drop-in hours. They're run by Lou O'Mell, and it's up on the 3rd floor. His next one is Wednesday, February 7th from 1 to 3. So if you're stuck on something and you're like, what, I can't figure this out, you can come and he will help you. And he will work through it. He's a wonderful, experienced genealogist that can help you work through that. And I know that they used to give the classes on Saturdays as well if you're working. I don't know if they rotate between Wednesdays and Saturdays now, but you can ask the resource librarian for the next upcoming dates. Then in April during Library Week, I put March. Let me do it. Every week's in April. 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 Yes, Wednesday, April 11th, I will be in here for the Lockport Library during Library Week. And they bring out laptops, and we delve into the Ancestry Library Edition. So it's a hands-on thing. I will show you exactly where on the website to go to find that, draft card, to find the directories and things like that. And you work on your genealogy while we do it. So it's an hour and a half. You have to register for it because there's only so many laptops. Yes.
Going back to that Ward, whatever his name is, I think we got something goofy there. Because I have the Saturday the 10th down. Do you think I wouldn't want anybody to show up.
It is Saturday. What is wrong with you? I was doing these slides eating a burger with her right before this. That should say Saturday. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, because Saturday is March 10th.
Yeah, I just had the date wrong. I can't eat burgers and make slides apparently. So it's Saturday's vote. This should be Saturday, March 10th, because I copy and pasted the Wednesday Niagara County one from the slide before. Saturday, March 10th from 11 to 12:30. Thank you, Barb. Goodness.
Because none of it, a lot of people wouldn't be able to come on Friday, on Wednesday.
Me too. And I read it. So those dates should both say Saturday. The dates are correct. The day was wrong. And this should say April and not March. My goodness. So sorry. It's okay. It's the last slide. I can't make any more mistakes. So I'll go, okay. One more time, just real quick. Niagara County Genealogical upcoming programs. Saturday, February 24th at 10 to 2, the Lisa Louise Lock-In. And then Wednesday, March 28th at night, 7 p.m. is the dating photos through fashion. Those are at 215 Niagara Street. And this is where, because I copy pasted the slide, this is where I started screwing up. The NT programs are both supposed to say Saturday. Everything else is correct. So Saturday, February 10th at 11 a.m. is the FamilySearch website. Saturday, March 10th at 11 a.m. is the church records. Okay, just 1 second. Okay. Then the Lockport Library has an upcoming Wednesday, February 7th at 1 o'clock. And then this should say Wednesday, April 11th at 6. So sorry. I added these slides on last, because I was researching and I should have, yeah, that's what I got. Anyhow, good luck. Thank you for coming. If you have questions, any one of the board members can help answer them. Please come back to our next programs, have some refreshments, and thank you very much and good luck on your journey.
Thank you.